Okay, so let's show you a few examples of what we can do with Python and Excel using XlWings. Here we've got a text file, a comma-separated value file, which has lists of songs, artists, and radio station call signs. So what we're going to do here is use some Python functions that we write to query this file. And doing it this way, it's, for example, you can dip your toe in the water and see how complicated a big file, for instance, would be before you go and import it into Excel and then, for example, crash Excel. Let's look at our first function. So I created one function called artist and song, C4 here being the file name and path of this text file. Okay, so let's just activate this function by putting in an equal sign. It's scanned the complete file and it's returned less than 2238 rows. What this Python function done, it's effectively removed any duplicates from the file. And let's actually look at the code that was here. Remember, I'm just giving you an overview and we'll start getting into some details, just trying to give you the big picture of what you can actually do with this. So I've created the function artist and songs. It's got the what's known as decorator. This is an XlWings term, decorator, which is at XW because we've imported XlWings as XW. So you say at xw.func for function, and that way XlWings working with Excel knows that this is going to be an Excel function, as we can see here. The path is passed in. The path goes to another function that I've written called internal build of contents. Now what I'm using here is Notepad++. Notepad++ is a free text editor which I suggest you download along with Sublime Text, because that's another free-ish one in the sense that they want you to buy it because they've got a nag screen, and but you can keep using it until you decide to actually buy it, if ever. So Notepad++, put that into Google, it'll take you to that. Download it, it's really good. And Sublime Text for your reference, Sublime Text editing done right, go to that site. That's another very good text editor. If you decide to buy it, tell them I sent you. Okay, so one of the useful things about both Sublime Text and Notepad++ is you can fold your code. So let's have a look here. Internal build of contents. I've got a function which I will actually include in the description called writeFileToList. And it's basically just this here. So what have we got? Def, function name, and any arguments you're passing to it. Unlike VBA or a lot of other languages, you don't put in the data type. Python works out what the data type is. List data, this is how we initialize a list variable, and a list variable is kind of similar to a VBA array. Okay, so I'm saying list data is going to be an array, or going to be a list, because I said it's equal to open brackets, close brackets. Then with open, so this is how you open a text file in Python. With open, the file name, or here indicating I want to read the file, it would be W if I want to write to the file. Encoding equals Latin 1. This is because text files have an encoding format. It could be UTF-8, UTF- is it 16, I think. There's quite a lot of different file encodings. And then as OF, I've imported a module called CSV. All you have to do is type import CSV at the top of your module. And then so reader equals CSV.reader, OF quotechar for row and reader. Bottom line is if you just copy this function that I've written into your module, you will then be able to just open a file and populate it into a list with writeFileToList. So internal build of contents opens a file, then we write the list data, which again is like an array, into what's known as a pandas data frame. A pandas data frame, if you look, we imported, and in the previous video we downloaded pandas. Import pandas as PD. Data frame is pd.dataframe list data. So now that list data here becomes a pandas data frame. And a pandas data frame is a bit like a database table or a spreadsheet, and you can manipulate it. So if we now go back to my original code where I'm doing artists and songs, so internal build of contents, you've got your data frame of your contents. So that's a data frame of everything that's in the file, and then we basically use some pandas data frame magic to get the unique list of artists and songs. So looking at this file again, we've got list data, write file to the list. We write the list into a pandas data frame. And then what we're doing with this line is we're saying that the column heads of the data frame are in the first row. If you look at the text file, the first row of the text file is the data headers, but it's just row 1. There's no such thing in a text file as the header. It's just row 1. So what we're doing here is we're telling the pandas data frame that the first row is actually the headers, and then we're telling it that the contents are from row 1 to infinity, or in this instance how many rows the data frame has. And what I'm doing in this line here, it's a bit like an advanced filter. What we're saying is that we just want these 3 columns: the song clean, the artist clean, and the call sign. And then you've got this command which exists in pandas, drop duplicates. So within your Python, you can say, of all the stuff, drop duplicates, and write that drop duplicates stuff into the contents. So this is the line that effectively brings you from 37,674 rows of data down to 2,230 rows of data. Now let's have a look at another Python function that works with Excel. It's called getCallSigns. So again, we've got 37,000 odd rows in the file, but you can see here we've got call signs. Say, for example, I want to know all the songs that were attributable to a particular call sign in this file. Well, what we're doing here is we're passing in a call sign as a criteria. So in this instance, it's WXGL. So let's activate this function by putting an equals in. It's scanning the file, and now you can see, because I've just got an Excel count A function here, we've returned 391 songs attributable to the call sign WXGL. How was this done under the hood? Get call signs. Let's have a quick look at this. And again, the great thing about Notepad++, which you don't have in the VBA editor, and it's very annoying because you don't have that, is cold folding. I can just fold away the functions that I'm not particularly looking at. How is this done? Get call signs, we put in the path, we put in the filter, and the filter being WXGL. And because we get our data frame again from internal build of contents, which I've already shown you. If you have a filter applied here, this is your query. So df contents call sign.string contains filter. So the filter being WXGL, we've passed that in, and now we've created a list from the query, which is going to be sent back, and that's this here: unique C, unique column, call sign. These are the kind of things you can do. And so watch this now. This here is the final function I'm going to show you, and then we'll do some experimental coding. Okay, so with this final function, it's querying the large table, but there's only, when you exclude the radio call signs and you just want a list, this particular function is giving you a list of just songs and artists. That's it. And when you look at songs and artists, we've got 2,231 songs and artists, but it's querying the 37,000 row file. So say, for example, I want to find a song that contains the word can't. So let's see if that exists. I don't know. We will see. Okay, so there's a number of songs that contain the word can't in the song name. So I could say now, oh, that's by the Rolling Stones. What else do we have by the Rolling Stones? So I'll do ROLLING, rolling. What it's now doing is I've got an and. I've said and is false because one of the arguments we've passed to this function. Let me show you the actual function, I suppose. It's called artists and songs with filter. So if we go to artists and songs with filter, this code's a little bit more intense. Again, we're using internal build of contents. We're using data frames quite heavily here, and we pass in songs that we're looking for. So this particular songs will be a list of songs, and that's going to be whatever is in this area here. So that's why it's L songs is a list, L artists is another list, which is what's going to be in here. And then the final argument is and true. So what that basically means is, am I going to have an and situation between artists and songs, or am I going to have an or situation? So and equals false means give me anything that contains can't and anything that contains rolling. So it means if it contains can't, give me that, and in addition to that, give me stuff that has rolling. Now, if, for example, I make and true, so this is more restrictive. So the song has to have can't and it's got to have rolling. So if we make that true, it's thinking, it's searching the file, and so now we've gone down to 3 rows. So you could use these functions, for example, to go out to the web and search a web page and pull back some data much more powerfully than you can do with any of Excel's ability to go check to a database, whatever, and it'll run really fast. Okay, so let's create a quick project from scratch. So I'm going to copy a path from Explorer. Let's launch the command prompt, and I'm going to do cd to go to a directory, and CLS to clear the screen. So I'm assuming you followed the previous video, which was linked below. So we go XlWings, quick start. I'm just going to call this April demo. So what's happened is XlWings has now created a base spreadsheet and Python file. So let's go there right now. And here we have April demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open this in Notepad++, and I'm going to open April demo into Excel. When you create the XlWings project like we've just done, it creates an Excel file and a Python file of the same name. If you want to include Python files in your Excel project that are not the same name as the file, you've got to put the names here separated by a semicolon. So in this instance, I'm going to leave that alone, but we're going to just use the aprilDemo.py file. So I'm just going to get some data now to put into the file, so bear with me. And what we're going to do is we're going to write a function that's kind of similar to current region, which is something that does this, but it's not quite as powerful. I'm going to call the function something like get square range top left, which means if you put your cursor there or you give the function that reference, it's going to do something like that. Okay, it's effectively going to go and get the bottom cell and the rightmost cell. It can be kind of fooled, but for most situations it will work just fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of all this code here. So let's get started. We're going to create a function, def get square range top left. And I want to pass it in a range variable. So I'm going to go range top left. And a function has to be terminated with the colon. What we're going to do is we're just going to test the function as we go along. So I'm just going to put return test. What we've also got to do is I'm going to do @xw.func, but in addition to that I'm going to type in category equals business programmer, and I'm going to try it with a space and see if that works. What I'm going to do is save, and then you click on your XlWings tab, click on import functions and press import functions. Okay, and BP isn't in its current directory. I'm just going to get rid of that for the moment. And we'll just do import functions again. Okay, so now if I put my cursor there, and if I go to formulas, and if I go to insert function, because I put in the category of business programmer, we should hopefully have a business programmer. There you go, business programmer category in the functions list. And there you have it, get source range top left. And I'm just going to click in there and just click there and click OK. And we got test. So there's test. So, Sean was here, Control S to save it, and F2, and you have Sean was here. So we now know the function is working. Okay, so let's look at this function again. Insert function, category is business programmer, get range top left. But it doesn't tell us anything else. Python function, just have a look at this particular screen here. Now what I'm going to do is put some more information around this function. So @xw.arg, and what I'm going to do is put in the name of the argument, and in this instance it's range top left. So I put in single quotes, and what I can now do is say it's a range, and doc for documentation equals your range address. Another thing I can put in here is I can document the actual function by putting in a single quote and saying this simulates a poor man's get current region. If I save it, what I got to do first, of course, is import functions. Whenever you make a change to the interface of the function, and what I mean by the interface is change anything here, you've got to re-import the function. If you change the internal code of the function, makes no difference. But if you change the interface, the name of the function, the arguments, or the descriptors, you've got to re-import the function. So let's just do that now. Function has been imported. Now, if I go to formulas, insert function, we're on business programmer. So here we go. Get square top left. This simulates a poor man's get current region. So it's telling you what the function's about. So now if I click OK, but in addition to that, range top left, this simulates a poor man's get current region, range top left, your range address. You say your range address. So you can actually document the arguments as well. So you're starting to build functions that look very professional. Get some brownie points with your boss. Okay, so range top left, let's just put in the range top left and click OK. Sean was here. Well, that's not very useful. Let's build the function out a bit more. Okay, so what I want to simulate with this particular function is getting the start column of here, and then I want to do a end write and get the column number here. Regrettably, in XlWings, when you're calling it from an Excel function, the current region doesn't do this, so I'm having to make up my own current region. So if you put your cursor on your data and you do Control *, you get the current region really easily, but I'm trying to simulate that with a minimum of coding. So we get the column of here and then end write to get the column number of here. So it should be 2 and 4. So let's go I start column equals range top left dot column, and that would be lowercase. Okay. Now, here's the thing, and this is what kind of makes things a little bit difficult when I'm sort of, it's keeping it short and punchy. XlWings also will give you access to what's known as the Windows COM library, and COM is the component object model. So it's what drives Excel VBA and other projects. It's what makes it object oriented. So when you do worksheet.range, the worksheet.range, that's COM. So the thing to bear in mind is if you start using the COM object model, it's a different library to the XlWings one, but you can use it within XlWings. And remember, when you're in Python, everything is case sensitive. So for example, just watch this. We're going to get a worksheet object, but what we're going to do is we're going to access it under the COM object model because it's more powerful. Please don't be scared. It's not that bad. So watch this. WKS equals range top left dot sheet dot API. In VBA, if you've got a range object, you can derive the worksheet that the range is sitting on by doing range my range, or whatever your range is. In this instance, it's range top left. In VBA, you can do range top left dot parent, and range top left dot parent, well, what's the parent of the range? It's the worksheet. And so range dot top left, in this instance, dot parent would be the workbook. So you could do my workbook equals range top left dot parent. In XlWings though, the way you do that is when I do range top left dot sheet, I'm accessing the parent of the range. So if I wanted to get to the workbook using the parent structure within XlWings, it would be range top left dot sheet dot book, and then I've got back to the workbook. So that's what's happening here. Now, dot API gives you, or in this instance, the API of the Excel VBA object for worksheet. And because it's case sensitive, what I recommend you do is, if you're not sure, you could test it out in code, or you can press F2 in VBA. And if you go to Excel, you've got all your objects here. So for example, if I want to go to worksheet, I scroll down worksheet. So these are all the spellings and capitalizations. So you can see it's pretty simple really. Within Excel, VBA or Microsoft's way of doing stuff is they capitalize the first letter of everything. So for example, if I want the range, so I'll go down to range, and you can see its range is, you can see the spelling of range. So you can do it that way. Or the other way, you can just find something, if you're not sure, is we've got sheet 1, SHEET 1 dot range, and you can use VBA to find the spellings of things, okay? Hope that's not too confusing. So worksheet.api. So now this worksheet object is not an XlWings object, it is a COM object. So reason is the COM Excel, let me make this even more clearer. If I go to worksheet, I have got all this stuff when I use COM that I can play with. I've got all this functionality to play with just for the worksheet, whereas there's a lot less functionality within XlWings, but XlWings is useful because it gives me access to all of this. So the end game here is I need to get a range reference, which will be in the format of picking up the range address B2 and the range address of D20. Okay, so what we got to do now is do range start, because I'm going to first of all get the range address here. So that's going to be range start equals worksheet.range. Now, the reason this is worksheet.range with a capitalized R is because this worksheet object is the COM object, so it's got the same capitalization as VBA. But range top left, that's come in here, this is an XlWings range, so it'll be range top left dot address lowercase, because that's how XlWings does it. If it was if it was the COM one, it would be a capital A for address. Now I want to get the numerical end column, so I'm going to do I end col equals range top left, which is the XlWings one, dot end. And this is, we're doing this using XlWings terminology. And there's an API I can show you. There's a website where you can see all of this. End right, and it's going to be dot column. So what this line of code is done is it started here. It's done end right. So then we're saying after you get to the right, what is the column number? So that's a dot column. Now we need to get the last row also. And I've written the function for that. And what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to paste the function in here just to keep this moving along. And I'll explain it as we do, because otherwise this video will take too long. Let's have a look at this. What we're going to do here now is I'm going to do last row equals get last row. And I'm going to pass in the start column that I've picked up there, and I'm going to pass in the end column, and I'm going to pass in the worksheet. So when we do that, we pass in the start column, the end column, and the worksheet. So then from that, I get the number of rows in the actual spreadsheet, iSheet rows, which is going to be worksheet.rows.count, which is using the VBA COM methodology because you've got capital R's and C's. So what that's effectively doing is it's counting how many rows are in the spreadsheet, 1048576. Okay, then I create a list variable for list final row, and then what's going to happen is what this function effectively does is, because let's just imagine something here. Let's just imagine that the data looks like this. Okay, so what this function does is it goes to the bottom of the spreadsheet, it does end up, and it goes, okay, so the last row here is 20, okay, in column B. Then it's going to go down to the bottom. It's going to, because this is iterating for I in range start column to end column. So it's going to iterate from column 2 to column 4. Basically, the way the range function works is you've got your start column, which in this instance would be 2. You got your end column, which is 4. But this is like a for loop, but it never does the final one. So in this instance, I have to add 1 to the final one to get it to do the final one. So it's going to loop for column 2, then it's going to do column 3 and go end up. But look, in this instance, column 3 is saying 19, and in the other instance it's going to do this, and then column 4 is going to say 17, but we know our data ends on row 20. So what happens then is I get the row, and what I do is I'm adding it to the list. Remember, list is like an array. So what this list is going to have is something that looks like, it's going to look something like this. It's going to look like 20, 19, 18. So that's what the list variable list final row is going to look like, that 20, 19, 18. But I then run it through the max function, and so the max function is going to say, well, the maximum of those three values is 20. So here's 20. So then it's going to decide that the final point is 20. That's what we're doing in that particular function. So it will return, so get last row, in this instance, this function that I wrote, get last row, will return, in this instance, the value of 20. Okay, so last row is going to be 20. So then I'm going to return a range object, which is using the standard VBA range methodology, not using addresses, but using two range objects. So it's going to be something like range, start range, and end range, and dot value to return the value that's in the range. So what the function is effectively going to do is it's going to get that start range, and it's going to get that end range, and then it's going to say the range is all of that. And that's what this last final line of code is going to do. So we've got our com worksheet range because it's Windows. The start range is range start, and the end range is going to be worksheet dot cells last row, which is the line above, and end column dot value. And it's got to be a capital V because we're dealing with com in this instance. So let's just run that, and that should work. Let's save it and let's test it. Oh, okay, yeah. So, and this is what happens in real time when you're doing stuff. This XLUp value, because I'm working on com here, I need to put in the value for XLUp. Well, let's find the value for XLUp. What I'm going to do is type XLUp. And that's another thing that you just noticed is the Python error has come back into the cell. Now, here's a useful trick. If you get an error and you want to read it easily, because it goes across multiple lines and it's not always that user-friendly to read like that, but it does have embedded carriage returns. Just get Notepad like that, pull it up and paste the error into Notepad, and there's your error. And usually the error you want to see is around the start. But what you want to do is you want to look for the errors that are related to your module that you created, because this is stuff that's going on under the hood, but the problem is usually going to come with stuff that's in your module. So line 7 and line 20 in my code. So if we look here at line 7, we got line 7. It doesn't like this end up, and it doesn't, because that was called from this here, get last row, get last row. Line 20 is showing as a problem as well, because the problem is within the code that line 20 generates. So as I said, let's find out what XLUp is. So we're in VBA, we go to VBA, and so you could do, all I have to do is XLUp, and we can see that XLUp is 4162 negative. Replace that with negative 4162, or better still, I can do XLUp equals negative 4162 as a constant. So in future, I just have to type XLUp here and it should work. Let's save that. And now we go back to the function here, F2 to recalculate it. And there's our data. So for example, let's just do another little trick here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shift this down, and what I'm going to do is purposely break stuff here, but just to give you an idea of another little trick, how to break stuff. That's my trick. Well done, Sean. Well done. Insert cells, shift cells down, and I'm just going to do F4, F4. So what you could also do is I could also do, let's see, if I do B2, okay, and then in my function I can type indirect B2 and it still works. So now if I do B3, you see we've now lost the top. So indirect is a very useful function because you can check what it's doing, if you don't already know, is when you use indirect, it's basically, it's as if I typed B3 into the function. So it's effectively indirectly controlling the flow. So I can do B2. If I just created some more data here, say, and we know that that is in K2. So if I type K2, the function's returned what was over there. I type B2, the function is now returning this information here. Now, just to prove the Python function is doing its thing, if I type Sean here, you've got Sean appearing there. Isn't that cool? So what I really like about using Python with Excel is that it's quite a powerful programming language, but when you use it with Excel, you don't have the disadvantages of a lot of programming languages. One of the disadvantages of a lot of programming languages out there is when you're getting started, it's very difficult to get real stuff done, because If you're writing in C++ or Java or whatever, even Python without using it with Excel, you don't have an easy user interface. Whereas with this, you can write your code and real stuff gets done because we use spreadsheets, we use databases, we use forms. So if you type XlWings into Google like so, it'll take you to the XlWings site. Okay, so there's your XlWings site. So if you go to docs.xlwings.org, English latest, you've got all the documentation here. You've got your getting started, but to be quite honest, I'd suggest you go through my video for that because it took me quite a while to get it working, basically. What you've got is you've got your getting started features, data structures, and you've got your advanced features here. But in addition to that, what is very, very useful once you get started is the API reference. So for example, if we look at Sheet, for example, this is what you got available to you on the XlWings Sheet object. Sheet activate, autofit, book cells, etc. But this is the useful one, sheet.api, because when you hit sheet.api, returns the native PyWin32 or AppScript object of the database engine being used, which then gives you the ability to, I must reiterate, if we go to press F2 here in VBA and go to the worksheet object, you have all this stuff available to you on the COM worksheet versus, so maybe you see a difference. This is why you've got the API, because you can see we've got worksheet highlighted here, but you've got a few methods which are useful, methods and properties, but you've got a lot more available to you on COM, and that's why Felix, who's written XlWings, has given you the option of getting into the API for the various Excel objects. He's written a book which is available on Amazon. It's linked below in the description. Have a look at the description because I'll put in some code functions mentioned here just to help you get started. And give me some information on the comments and some feedback on what other stuff related to this you would like me to show you. I will produce more videos. But this one was a bit of a don't know where to start, because it's like, where do I start? Because it gets quite complicated. Lots of elements. There's a lot of digging in one can do. Anyway, hope you found this useful.